I'm extremely happy to speak something on behalf of UNESCO on this occasion. The association engagement between UNESCO and Auroville dates back more than 5 decades. The first resolution on Auroville was adopted in the General Conference of UNESCO in 1966. And after 2 years, we've seen the very wonderful inauguration of Auroville over the place, on the place, where to understanding 124 countries and also the older states of India represented, and then celebrate the establishment of Auroville. And the UNESCO organized the 40 years the anniversary of the Auroville in our headquarters in Paris 10 years back. So needless to say, UNESCO has been working very closely with Auroville and then try to encourage member states to participate in development of Auroville, understanding that the spirit and the principle of Auroville is quite close to the mandate and missions of UNESCO. On the other hand, the government of India has been also supporting Auroville to a great extent. In the year 1988, they passed the Auroville Foundation Act, in which the government tried to protect and support the development of Auroville. Just last month, the government of India submitted the draft resolution on Auroville to the General Conference. I understand that Dr. Karan Singh will talk something about the resolution. So, as such, we've been enjoying the very wonderful collaboration with Auroville. Why? Because the identity and principle of Auroville are quite resonating with the UNESCO spirit. I understand that in the charter of the Auroville, it says Auroville doesn't belong to nobody. Belongs to nobody in particular, but to the humanity as a whole. And Auroville will be the venue place where unending education, as well as the bridge between the past and the future. And so I understand that this spirit is quite relevant today. The last year, all the nations of the world adopted Sustainable Development Goals, whose principle is no one left behind. And in the Sustainable Development Goals, of course, government of India and all the nations are committed in achieving 17 SDGs, which refers to environmental conservation, sustainable development in economical sense, cultural diversity, the poverty alleviation, gender equality, human rights, all these kind of things are packaged in SDGs, especially SDG 4 on education, which encourages the country to ensure the equitable, inclusive, quality education for all and promote lifelong learning opportunities. If you look at the Charter of Auroville, it says that Auroville should be the place of unending learning. That means exactly lifelong learning. And then where, to understanding, actually I visited Auroville February in 2016, where I met Mr. Booty and also the Jyoti, the Japanese gentleman, who served tea for me. It was really one fantastic moment for me. To me, it has everything where UNESCO should pursue in the spirit of sustaining and attaining SDG 17 goals. The lifelong learning is easy to say, but it's not so easy to carry on. But to understanding in the Auroville, everybody has opportunity to learn, and the meaning of education is not imparting the skills and knowledge to get a job and money, but to fulfill their mandate and then explore his identity and his beings. I wrote one book published by UNESCO, Learning the Treasure Within. This was published in 1996. In other words, this is the UNESCO's report to try to depict, to envisage the learning in 21st century. And Dr. Karan Singh is a very great contributor as one of the committee member to publish this book. And this book tried to encourage the country and stakeholders to look at learning in 4 pillars. The one is learning to learn, learning to do, and learning to live together, and then learning to be. And today we have eminent panelists. Today's program, the last program, will be the panel discussion. They will reflect on what is the learning to live together. But to me, what we should learn from Auroville is how we can promote learning to be. And in this chapter, I found a very wonderful phrase, which I will quote. More than ever, education's essential role seems to be give people the freedom of thought, judgment, feeling, and imagination they need in order to develop their talents and maintain as much as possible in control their lives. So it doesn't say any kind of the important skills or the knowledge or the information we need to get for the economical sense. This book, especially in the chapter and the learning to be, tried to mention and then touch upon learning in a more holistic and integrated way. And this book is still relevant, and then we've seen a lot of essence in actual practice in activities in Auroville. So in that sense, the UNESCO and other parties should look at Auroville as a kind of the mentor or the practitioner to learn what is the learning in 21st century. Well, with this, I'd like to conclude, and we will have the wonderful thought. We will have the wonderful thought and views from Dr. Karan Singh on the activities of Auroville, as well as the relationship between UNESCO and Auroville, and what we could learn from the practice of Auroville.
How much there is in common between UNESCO and Auroville. The film began with saying that it began with a dream. Auroville also began with a dream. It was the mother's dream. And as a result of that dream, and the tremendously powerful force of Sri Aurobindo's philosophy and teachings and blessings behind that dream, the mother conceived of a unique community, a unique township, a unique city, if you like, a multinational, multi-linguistic, multi-religious, multicultural community. And as a result of that dream, what has happened has been nothing less than a miracle. In 50 years, that whole sandy beach there, which is totally a sort of a desert, as it were, has been converted into a green oasis. Thousands and thousands of trees have been planted, buildings have come up, and the community has started functioning. And of course, the centerpiece, as you know, you must remember when you went, is that great Matri Mandir, the temple to the mother. And its Matri Mandir in the middle is what the mother called the soul of Auroville. It's a remarkable, extraordinary structure built entirely by Aurovillians. And she had this whole vision, everything, each one of it, the entrance, the upper chamber with the great crystal, and one ray of light falls on it from above, and all the gates and the gardens and so on. So it's an extraordinary experiment. It is still a work in progress. Auroville is certainly not something that is completed, nor is UNESCO for that matter, because these sort of organizations are constantly changing and constantly growing. But the fact that there's so much in common between them, and between the links, particularly in education, this fourth sustainable goal of education, quality education for all. Mother talked constantly of unending education, lifelong education. I was a member of that committee, that report that was just mentioned. That was one of the insights that we had there. And the fourth goal, ensure inclusive and quality education for all and promote lifelong learning. That sums up actually what UNESCO feels also. and what is the goal of Auroville. And we've had a large number of resolutions by UNESCO which have supported Auroville. And I'm happy to announce that I got this just message a couple of days ago from our representative in UNESCO to say, I'm happy to report that the draft declaration of Auroville was adopted with full consensus and no debate in the Social and Human Sciences Commission and also the plenary session of the General Conference. And I'm going to read out that resolution because I think it should go on record that what UNESCO has said. The heading is Cooperation of UNESCO with the International Township of Auroville, India. The General Conference, recalling the foundation of the International Township of Auroville in South India on February 28, 1968, when the youth of 124 member states participated in the ceremony by depositing the soil of their country in the foundation urn to symbolize the coming together of the nations of the world. Noting that the General Conference of UNESCO unanimously adopted resolutions of support to Auroville in 1966, 1968, 1970 and 1983, inviting member states and international non-governmental organizations to participate in the development of Auroville as an international cultural township designed to bring together the values of different cultures and civilizations in harmonious environment with integrated living standards which correspond to man's physical and spiritual needs. Recognizing that the aims of Auroville are to promote international understanding, peace, innovative education, a learning society, and all-round material and spiritual development for harmonious individual and collective growth, and that such aims contribute to the advancement of the objectives of UNESCO, especially dialogue among civilizations, cultures and religions, cultural diversity and culture as a factor of development. Appreciating that the Government of India passed in 1988 the Auroville Foundation Act for the purpose of protecting and encouraging the development of Auroville. Also appreciating that Auroville International Centers have been established in many countries of the world which are engaged in bringing youth from their countries into contact with the aims and ideals of Auroville and in facilitating internships, volunteer stays and academic research programs. Also recognizing that Auroville has developed into a center of expertise in a wide range of fields, benefiting India and noting its success in sharing its experience and helping the development of its neighboring rural population. Acknowledging that Auroville is inviting all nations of the world to participate in its development, especially of the international zone, which is designated as an educational campus hosting cultural pavilions of all nations or groups of nations, expressing the genius of each culture. Also noting that 28th February 2018 will mark the 50th anniversary of the founding of Auroville. Further recognizing that Auroville is a successful and unique model project, proving the capacity of an international community after almost 50 years of existence to continue to live up to its initial founding ideas of peace and international harmony, which are also UNESCO's own values and principles, as well as some of its major priorities, invites the Director General to reinforce the association of UNESCO with Auroville and organize commemorative activities for its 50th anniversary, and to re-invite the member states on the special occasion of Auroville's 50th anniversary to participate in Auroville's further development. I think that deserves a round of applause. Not for me, but for UNESCO for having done what they've done. I think it's unusual for UNESCO to pass 5 resolutions, as many as 5 resolutions, and particularly this one. We all were involved in that. It's come out rather well. So there's that, and now there's also the Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Education in Peace and Sustainable Development, which was mentioned and shown in the film, and the director, Anitya, is here. He will be one of the panelists, which is an organization, Category 1 organization, the only Category 1 UNESCO institution in Asia, and that is specifically directed towards educating for peace and sustainable development. And therefore, I think that Auroville has already done a lot of useful work in education. SIAD has done a lot of work those very good textbooks for teachers, for students and all. But my lament is that none of these textbooks seem to have found their way into the mainstream of education. You see, what has happened in India is that all our great people have got their own system. Sri Aurobindo and the mother have integral education. Rabindranath Tagore had the Shanti Education Experiment. Mahatma Gandhi had the Nei Talim. J. Krishnamurti has the Rishi Valley situation. All these great people have had their own educational philosophies. But those philosophies, despite all the respect that we pay to them, to the people, those philosophies remain peripheral to the Indian educational system. So I think what is really required now, and now again a new educational policy is on the anvil. It's been on the anvil so long that the anvil is on the verge of collapse by now. But nonetheless, it's been still on the anvil. So I think this is a very good time in which we can perhaps feed our ideas into the government of India and the committee which is being set up. I think that's something very important. We did that with the earlier committee, but then that committee got dissolved when the minister changed. Now there's a new committee. Nobody has any idea who the committee is or what they're doing. But we could find out. Because as you asked, what is it that we can actually do? What we can actually do is, apart from our own experiments, we have to somehow or the other mainstream these basic ideas. For example, the 4 pillars of learning that we delineated in that report. Particularly the third one, learning to live together. Unless we learn to live together, we're going to tear this society, the fabric of society. The way now we're seeing, once again, a recrudescence of religious conflicts, of caste divisions and so on. Fair enough, India has always had such a huge country, you can't have a homogeneous country. But there should be no conflict. We have to have a nation which subsumes, as it were, which integrates all these various facets of Indian culture and civilization. And for that, an educational system is absolutely essential. So, as a yogi, I hope that I have now just completed my 8 years as India's representative to UNESCO, and I'll be completing my term as chairman of the MGIEP. But I hope that this collaboration will continue in the years ahead. Because I really do believe that Auroville and UNESCO are, as it were, born for each other. And we'll have to continue to support each other. So that's all that I have to say on this occasion. All of us who are working for an integrated human being in a sane and peaceful global society. That's what our goal is. And with the amount of tension that we find around the world today, we need this countervailing force for peace and for order. And Auroville with 52 nationalities living there together, apparently in peace. I haven't come across any recent reports of any major clash. But nonetheless, obviously there are always problems, but it's a remarkable thing. So, as chairman of the Auroville Foundation and as my close connection with UNESCO, I'm very, very happy to be here on this occasion.
And on behalf of all the residents, we thank you very much for giving us this opportunity as Dr. Karan Singh to take out Auroville out of its pioneering battle, growth, and it has put its foot down, and it's 50 years. In a human life, you might say it's a turning point, and now we are aiming for the next 50 years. And that turning point needs to have a short reflection of the past, and I am supposed to lead you along this journey of the last 50 years. I won't make it long because I don't want to take away the time of the panelists, but I think it has something to do with the very theme of this conference, learning to live together. The very concept of Sri Aurobindo, and then further on elaborated by the mother, is the concept that there is no division between living and learning. A true directional living which has somewhere a core value is automatically a learning. And in the time when I grew up in Germany, you lived till you went to school, then you were supposed to learn, you stopped living, I did. And when you were out of school or you ran away from school, which I did, where you were supposed to learn, then you start living again. That is the old division. So basically what the very essential uniqueness of Auroville is, and I can reflect on my life, I had to bring up 5 children. They're not all of me, but there were 3 adopted children. I came into that Auroville, which is, there's nothing, there's no water, no road, no electricity. Once a while the wind blows from the sea, whips up red dust, close the windows. There's no school. It's like every adult or every child who had a bit skill would bring it and pass it on to the other. It was really a pioneering, like it might have been in the Wild West or might have been in any pioneering state where you had to educate your children. I don't know whether I gave a handicap to that first generation. I think history shows that they missed out on something. They missed out on specific, acceptable qualification. But there is something else. And if I look at them, how well they do, their track record, which is not based on a diploma, but still, they have the guts and the aliveness and the awareness. They go into universities in Europe and America, knock, knock, and somehow they manage to be accepted, even in India. Out of that very, very rough beginning, because even before the foundation, it emerged, and suddenly the mother, the founder of Auroville, taking Sri Aurobindo's vision and bringing it into that matter where she says, I want to bring another place outside of Pondicherry, and also made it very distinct. The ashram is for individual seeking. You make up your life, you become a sadhak. You sacrifice to life for the cause. Auroville, on the other hand, is a kind of collective aspiration. She says, invited are all men of goodwill who aspire for a higher and truer life. So this higher and truer life, this again is a value, where all your life is sort of directional, and that becomes the learning. And you must see that actually when the moment of the inauguration comes, you have some pictures, the timeline there, you see the marking stone of Auroville, totally barren. And it's like we go there, dig a hole, and put a stone, AV, Auroville. It reminds me of the old time, you might know the story of Romulus and Remus, when they built the city of Rome. And he had that dream of the city, and we all carry somewhere that dream in us of the golden city, the Kanchipuram. And he draws a circle on the ground. That will be the city walls. And one of them, I don't know if it's Romulus or Remus, I assume Romulus, just steps over to mock him. And we had a lot of mocking to face. It was not easy. It was difficult, hard. Police cases, beating up. I was 3 times given leave India notice. Dr. Karan Singh, when I walked into his Ministry of Education at that time, he looked at me, what, you're still around? But then I was allowed to stay on. India, I cannot think of any other country which has that, whatever you call it, I can't give a word for it, but that whiteness, that brilliant. Anyhow, taking you a little bit through the timeline, troubles. Indira Gandhi sends a commission, they look at it and say, well, these motley band of foreigners, they have something, they have a cause. And finally it results in the passing of the Auroville Foundation Act. And even that is a unique thing. I cannot think of any other country where an act is passed by Parliament unanimously, where it starts in the preamble referring to the mother. Dr. Karan Singh was there and gave that famous symbol, that judgment, that that act, what we are doing now is an arrow shot into the future. And that arrow keeps on flying. It hasn't yet hit the target. We were going on, and then it started this bringing that living into more specific things. The need was there. The earth was dying out, the water was running off, washing all the soil into the Bay of Bengal. The groundwater was depleted. We started, first I thought, the first scheme was, we would all be sitting in Pondicherry, we would be bussed out to this ground, and we would be a construction worker, build the city in 15 years, then turnkey ready, we cut open the ribbon, and then we live happily ever after. It didn't work that way. And it was good, and that's why it also takes so long. There's so many things which have been developed in Auroville, but they're still like in a capsule. We are not very good in recording and documenting and bringing out what is happening. Aurobindo speaks of 3 steps, and I think they apply to each one of us. Search, that means aspire, research, and then you apply. If it's just words and you're not living it, no power. You apply. You are the field testing guinea pig. And if it comes to something, then you extend. And I think Auroville now is at that verge, and we need your collaboration. We need the media. We need organizations like UNESCO, the Auroville Foundation, to help us into being transparent, to communicate, to become partner to India, to show what has been worked out in Auroville, its relevance for its bioregion, for Tamil Nadu, for India, for Asia, and the world, and then finally to have that consciousness of the planet. And I would like to end with that sense. I remember very well when the first pictures were sent down, when the first rocket left the terrestrial atmosphere, and looking back at this green planet, there was a sense, wow, that's one body. We are all part of that spaceship. And I must also say, Dr. Karan Singh might remember, the mother was very inspired by a photo exhibition at that time, before Auroville's foundation, which was called Family of Man. The first time it was shown, this in spite of all the difference, there's a oneness in us. And I had a very strong dream, when we were in the middle of divisions, that what Auroville is living and trying to learn and trying to participate in others is not uniformity. It is not even unity. It is a fierce, burning oneness.
Welcome to the panel discussion on learning to live together and on education, on the sustainable, unending education. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the panelists. And let me begin by Dr. Anantha Kumar Duryappa, who is the director of the Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Sustainable Development. He has done a lot of work in sustainable education and is also a fellow who visits, I'm told, Tokyo University frequently. To my left is Mr. Frederick. He is the pioneer full-time Aurovillian. All of you know him and heard of him. Then to his left is Inge. Inge is a member of the working committee of Auroville, but more importantly, she came to Auroville when she was 9 years old and was a student there, and actually studied in some of the schools in Auroville, and now is a teacher in a school in Auroville called the Future School. And to my right is Ms. Smita Vats, convener of ITEAS, that works with 1,000 schools and institutions all over India on heritage education, how to bring heritage education into schools, into the curriculum. Sri Aurobindo says here, evolution is not finished. Reason is not the last word, nor the reasoning animal the supreme figure of nature. As man emerged out of the animal, so out of man the Superman emerges. It's interesting, he says, so out of man the Superman emerges, not will emerge or has emerged. The use of the word emerges again points to the idea of evolution, that the human consciousness is constantly evolving, and at each moment each of us is in that state of evolution. And that brings us very much, when I read it, to the idea of unending education. Because if we say that Auroville is a place of unending education, it often brings to mind that for education to be unending, continuous, lifelong, the criteria for that is that we need to be always aspiring to grow. Growth of consciousness, unless that's there, we stop learning. How do you see the future of education? How do you see education evolving in the coming years, keeping in mind the idea of education to bring about sustainability, education to bring about harmony, learning to live together, education to bring about peace, collective, individual peace, education to bring about a growth of consciousness, unending education. So I thought I would begin with the youngest member on the panel.
Well, education starts at birth and even before that, and continues throughout life until the very last breath. And I think that by providing an environment, I think important is to acknowledge that there are two sides to every soul and every human being, and that by providing the environment of light rather than shadow, we can move in the right direction, and by providing the right tools to basically challenge the senses, which is something that can start already from a very young age. As soon as the child is aware of his or her senses, these can be used to bring consciousness into all the different aspects of the being, and can guide anybody, a child or an adult or whatever age, towards finding that inner place and towards finding the inner guide, towards finding your soul that can then carry you through your journey. So the future of education would look like provide the environment, provide the tools to each of the children to find this, to find his own soul, and not only find it but actually get in touch with it. And it's almost like a stranger that knocks at a door, and the more often the stranger knocks at the door, at some point the door, unlocks by itself, and then at some point the door is open, and then the touch is there constantly. And then we can use meditation and we can use concentration as tools, but eventually the aim of education, the future of education, can be that this door is always open and that we're always in touch with our inner being and our inner guide.
I was just thinking that I don't know what is the future of education, because I work with 500 children every day, and I see, at least in a city like Delhi, we see a lot of division. we see a lot of anger, we see a lot of, moving away from secular ethics. And what we've discussed often at Itihas is that, and we're working on it, that what we need to do for children is not really to divide their mind or their brain into subjects, which is what, like Dr. Karan Singh said, that how do all these thoughts really go right down to the roots? What is being transacted to our children today is so different from the thoughts we all might have in this auditorium, or even in places where there are experiments of progressive education and thought which are emerging. But what's really happening on the field is very worrisome. I think that moving children towards thoughts of dignity, compassion, gender equality, understanding, respect for natural resources, understanding where they are coming from, and connecting the dots of learning. Because learning is it's in different boxes. I don't know if that's making sense. But I'm talking from the point of view of a child. Learning is in boxes. Learning is about different subjects, and there's no connectivity. So they're not connected. And you'd be surprised, I'll share a story with you where we took a number of children yesterday to a Bauli, to a step well. And they were 8 to 12-year-olds. Just the concept that in a well, water fills up this way. It's groundwater coming up, and that water below the ground is connected and it flows, was a concept very difficult to understand. They kept thinking that the Bauli will fill up here. So a child who hasn't seen a well in a city hasn't understood that below the ground you don't need a passport or a visa, and that water flows freely. It's very difficult. I mean, I think our thoughts are a work in progress, but a lot needs to be done, and we really need to tackle it at a very simple level. We need to crack small issues, because that's where we get stuck. Deal with very, very basic learning at the primary, pre-primary level, where we need to connect children much more with nature and resources, with dignity and equality, I think, and compassion. Just that ability to be able to listen to each other, I think is, at least in a city like Delhi, it's depleted, if not depleting, and that's worrisome. That's the ground reality that we are facing here. And I think the education system together, all of us, we need to work to not worry so much about the subjects, but much more about connecting minds and hearts and getting children to just understand natural resources.
You're looking at a school system that pushes competition at the expense of the other. I always say that we have one of the best predatorial training systems in the world. That's our education system. And it comes right from the very start. So when you introduce these concepts of education for sustainability, it's cognitive dissonance that's created with our students. So in one sense, you're saying, compete, you got to do better. I still remember when, during school days, when you bring back after the exams, so what was your score? You're really happy and you say, hey, 90. The next question is, so who was the highest? And if it's 99, then so that's the system that we've grown up with. So when you talk about compassion and empathy, it's a foreign concepts. And usually it's taught as in a classroom, one subject, and then it just goes in and goes out, and then you're back to the real world. And the people that we admire, if you look at media, is always the ones who make the most money. We don't celebrate our scientists, we don't celebrate our the intellectual giants. We celebrate people who make the first $1 million. Our priorities are all wrong. And I'm just frustrated that we have this dichotomy in our systems, and how do you do that? So this comes to the second category, where, so what can we do? And at the Institute, so we've been playing around for these concepts for the last couple of years, and the two terms that I'd like to throw out today. One is what we call firing Gandhi neurons. And the second one is Einstein's equation of E equals mc squared, but we take away the equals, EMC squared. And let me start with the EMC squared. So that stands for empathy, mindfulness, compassion, and critical inquiry. And the whole idea is this within is to build not just intellectual intelligence. Many people talk cognitive, but everything is cognitive. It is in the 3-pound mass, even emotions come from there. It's the limbic system, it's not the heart. The heart just pumps blood, which is directed from the cognitive elements. So you talk about a balance between intellectual intelligence, which is where we have been focusing all the time, and emotional intelligence. And really mainstreaming this within schools. So I do agree that we move away from subjects, but that's going to take a lot of time. The Finnish are doing that already, looking at phenomena-based and problem-solved approach. But we've also understand that mathematics is important, science is important, and as we move forward, is how do you embed these concepts of empathy, compassion within maths and science? How do you, so it becomes part of our DNA, and that's where the challenge is, and we've been developing materials along that. So it's going to be a long and tedious road. I don't think this is going to happen within the next generation. It's going to happen hopefully if we start a concerted approach, 3 generations. I'm an economist by training, and so we look at each generation of 25. So that's about 75 to 100 years that we're looking at if we start now seriously. And I don't see that really being done seriously. I don't see the SDGs. I'm going to be very pessimistic. I don't see the SDGs. If you look at it's 4.7 is basically the SDG that we should be following, and in fact a simplified 4.7. But coming from the UN and spending a lot of time on negotiations, that's like the residue. If anybody knows the equation mathematics, that's the residue. Everything else that they could not put in the main equation is put into this error term, and we just grouped everything and dumped it on there and say, okay, that's what it is. If you look at it, it's got everything under the education for sustainable development, education for peace, education for global citizenship, education for peace. And these silos create more problems than solutions. Because then you have groups saying, I only do global citizenship, which is very different from peace, which is very different from sustainable development. When you look at it, at the end of the day, it's the education for humanity. That's what it is.
How do you see, education in Auroville? How can it be an example to be a kind of a guide or an example or a prototype of how it could provide a prototype to transform education in the mainstream?
I don't think Auroville should be aiming at finding answers. Auroville should remain in that space of questioning. And in fact, when you grow older, the future becomes more and more precious. There's a message by the mother when she says, remain young, never stop striving towards perfection. So as long as you strive, maybe you stay young. And I feel that Auroville should keep on its role of questioning, experimenting, what Auroville can provide. Not an answer, but a charged space. And it is strange that in the charter, Mother makes 3 times reference to the locality. She speaks about a bridge, a space, and a place. So it seems to be very kind of local specific. Many people I have brought to the matrimonio, only even to Auroville. I didn't first wanted to tell them all the wonderful answers we have found, and they were getting a bit bored with me. But when they came into the atmosphere of Auroville, something there, wait. And there was something gripping them, especially now with the matrimonio. So this space, which can be charged with this aliveness of eternal youth, I think it's something we can do. Obviously, what Dr. Karan Singh is referring to, the world is destroying itself. So what is this? What is the significance of this little island of the happy there? Why is it? But I think for me, I mean, don't know, I might be wrong, but there is a significance. If in a microscopic dimension you can work on issues like self-governance and the joy of learning and living without possession, if you can make it once happening, it has its occult reverberation which might appear anywhere in the world. I'm not saying that we are converting masses, but it adds one distillate, one drop into this cauldron. And I feel we cannot, I share your despair. I cannot not open the newspapers anymore. And when Aurobindo, who speaks about a progressive evolution, was questioned, progressive, you look what's happening in the world. And he said, yes, but it's still progressive. The divine has developed the unfortunate habit to wait for the last moment. So whether these efforts which are there can really, in the end, save this planet or not, I don't know, inshallah. But I feel Auroville should remain not formulating answers, but leaving this questioning alive. And that, I think, would be its most genuine force.
We've put perspectives on the challenges in mainstream education, the kind of approach that Auroville has towards education. And there seems to be, if you notice, a very different narrative that comes across from the different speakers, and I think it's interesting to hear that, and that is perhaps one of the challenges that we're going to face, that while Auroville has within itself a kind of space to be able to practice and to organize a free progress education, the world outside in society is very much embedded in challenges in education and a much more mental approach to its solutions. And I'm wondering now whether I could throw up a next question. How do you think that education can meet this challenge in terms of bringing about a change?
So there's 2 things that come to my mind immediately about this. One is that we need the best minds in education. Yeah. We need the best people in education. We need to pay them well. You know, since the issue of achieving monetarily came up. Jobs for teachers and for those who are mentors should not be the last choice of your career, but the first choice of your career, or having been through careers, you come back to education. That's one. The second, I would think, is that anybody in the role of mentoring needs to see their students as a camera. Because you see your truest image in the reflection of children or of those who are looking at you for which direction should you go in. And maybe cheat is a heavy word, but as a mentor, how true can you be to the thoughts that you're imparting? And I think if we can bridge that gap, and be it taking from the life of Gandhi, that my life is my message, or so many other quotes by him. I think those are the two things that immediately come to my mind. Bridge the gap and be true to what you preach. And let's have the best minds in the place where we want to create the best.
I think many of you have heard of the flipped school. We are toying with the idea of a flipped education to really clearly define the differences between means and ends. All right. Right now, education is seen as a means. Building human capital, and as many of the speakers have alluded, is to produce a really rational, producing economic agent. And then hopefully we will expect a good human being to be produced as well. We flip it. The flipping is that the goal is for human flourishing. That's what education is about, for human flourishing, the individual flourishing, societal flourishing. And the side product, or the externality as we call it, would be our productive economic agent. The good news is science, the findings from the neurosciences have already shown that this is possible. They have run through, and this is many studies across the world, where they have done longitudinal studies, where they have found that kids who have been exposed to mindfulness exercises, empathy, compassion, basically doing this particular within school systems, the productivity in maths and science is exponential. But they also produce well-balanced children. Bullying has gone down. Stress levels have gone down. So, and this is documented well. So it's a win-win situation. So that's something that we should be pushing for, making sure that that's the purpose of education. And if you look at SDG 4, it clearly says improving quality, improving access, and it's been inclusive. But it doesn't ask the question, what type of education? And if we don't, we are going to really improve what I say the best predatorial system. Imagine the danger that we have everybody performing at that level. Oh, scary. So in a way, I think it's good that there are that many what we define as illiterate. I think that's very condescending on everybody to define those who can read and write as illiterate, because we are always learning. If you go to a farmer, he's learning and he knows a lot of knowledge. To call him or her illiterate, I think, is very condescending by the institutions. So it is about learning, and it's about relevance. And the second point I want to make is it should be learner-centric. Every child learns differently. And we can provide boutique education because we have the technology that is available. I know many of you will say, oh my God, technology. I think technology can be an angel. It can be a devil as well. But that's like everything else, yes. But I think it can be an angel. I know many people have talked about artificial intelligence. But if you use it properly, I think it's got so much of potential in providing this kind of a boutique education for every child. I say that from experience because I have a son, and I'm sure many of you who was diagnosed with acute dyslexia. And the traditional schooling system just did not do justice. Sent into a school which started using technology, using visual, and he flourished. We can do it. We have the resources, we have the technology, it just needs leadership to do it.
I feel free in Auroville because I feel if I open up, or if I also open up within, that knowledge is already there. We just have to remove the debris. We are at a point where Auroville is poised now to interact. That doesn't mean we are going out and proselytize. No, we are even learning. We came to Delhi to learn. And I think this is a very strong learning experience, and I would very much like that the Aurovillians who came might come with you and see the stepwell or see your work. I mean, we are now adopting something which has grown within a certain protective bubble. The bubble is going, and we are now looking at India, at our neighborhood, at the Tamil rural population. And my experience is if we do together, not speak about it, but do together. And I just want to finish with one thing which I still dream. Auroville could create a third space for all the conflict situation in the world, whether it's the national distinction and rivalries, or whether it's the old and the young, or the poor and the old. I had a dream we would take a third space. We take young people from conflict situation, Tamil Tigers, Sinhalese, Palestine, Israel, take two of these, Auroville in, and do something together by being it in a charged space which supports it. I think that is maybe the fastest way to transmit knowledge for the future.
Well, for me, it's a feeling which is pretty clear, which means take it out of the classroom, because so far, as I can see, the monstrosities and all the things that are going wrong in the world are pretty much by the educated elite, and so definitely something has to change. And taking it out of the classroom and into your life, it means, I've always been a little bit fascinated by this thing, which is, I've completed my education, with a PhD, or I've completed my education with a bachelor's. When, for me, when I was out of university, I thought, okay, now my education really starts. The search, research, and apply, for me, the search was during that period, but the apply, which was for me the most important part of education, actually came much later. And while I was studying, I chose to study global health. I also realized that, we don't have answers for the problems of the world in the curriculums that we were studying. We do not have the answers. So going back to Auroville for me was the most important and significant contribution that I could make to actually change something, to do something of significance. So taking it out of the classroom and even in my own life, if I see how I live, which is a question I receive quite often, how do you live in Auroville if you don't have a salary, if you live on a maintenance which is enough to just cover your needs. And what that brings me is freedom, because I'm not working, I'm not at all attached to my salary, and whether I participate in organizing a conference in Delhi, or whether I'm working in my kitchen garden or training with my horse, it's all one life, one learning. And I think there's a message there in how we are applying the charter, that was given to us. There's a message there. So education, lifelong learning.
So in the last 20 years, or almost 19 years of the release of this document, The Gift of UNESCO to the World, how many countries have actually adopted portions of the UNESCO's framework for education? India, I know, has tried to incorporate some parts of it in its education curriculum framework, but then the ground reality, as we have been hearing, is so different. So, and I hear always about Finland, that Finland is one country where it has some best education system. Now, is it scalable? Is it replicable? The kind of diversity we have in India, and with so many legislations and the Right to Education Act, how do we really come for a universal framework I'm also an ardent promoter of the concept of global citizenship. I also hear about that from Honorable Dr. Karan Singh. So, and I've also heard Dr. Karan Singh present the UNESCO's education document in the concept of the Hindu cultural ethos, which made it very meaningful, at least for the majority population. But taking it forward through the Auroville experience, I'd like to hear a few more things.
Can we hear about a model from the Auroville? How do they educate some model which is already happening there? So we want to know more about how they are educating there.
Now what happens usually, as we're sitting in the city of Delhi, which is all about heritage, and heritage gives us an identity, and then our identity causes clashes, because when you build an identity of yourself, you tend to say, okay, this is my identity, that is a different identity, how do we cross borders with that? And then you come to the Charter of Auroville, which is all about crossing the identity barrier and saying, okay, you are two different identities and we come together. And especially you're talking about educating children who are fairly malleable. And when you tell them about heritage, you tell them about boundaries, how do you plan to take this, something which is something often associated with kings and religion and different sections of the society and times we've lived, with possibility of future in which they stay together?
I think if you give that sense of it has the time to evolve, and that may be one of the things which I didn't mention in Auroville, it allows itself the time. To the headache of our chairman, who said, my God, how long are they taking to finish their job? But I think it's a very important time, Carla, that you become aware of the healing factor of allowing it. When the mother was asked once a political question of some conflicts in Nagaland, the only thing she said to the people who brought her this conflict, will they listen? And I think that capacity to be not pressed by money, by time, I think that's one of the great qualities in Auroville. I don't know whether it in any form answers your question, but I think it would provide the platform for moving out of the conflict zone into celebrating the differences and the complementary factors of that.
Auroville, it's on a point that when you have a conflict, or let us say education, and if there are different understandings, different kinds of concept, different kind of development, usually you would say you have to fit into the system. Auroville has then the capacity to open up a new school. That means people who have a different understanding or a different kind of concept of education, they are moving, and Auroville is the place to allow it. There's not the question to say you have to fit in system A, in system B, or system C. So at large, we have systems which are reaching from no curricular education at all, no examination, up to schools where you can say, well, this guy would like to get a little more formal education. And the variety and the diversity, it's a trick. But it's the success of Auroville in a lot of fields. And that needs time and patience, and it's not going as fast as it's sometimes expected, sir.
But I think an identity is a necessity in a social system. It's very much like you need a name, you need to be called something. A school needs a uniform. You need to belong, you need to look like a CJMite, or you need to look like, everybody has an identity. But I think with that, it's important to teach children the similarities, because identities also create similarities. They don't create only differences. But we tend to talk about what sells. If I can use it very locally, we need to talk about the similarities that are created and not about the differences. So how you use that identity will really depend on, like I said, your mentor. And that's why you need the right kind of people mentoring. So it's nothing wrong with having the identity. It's great, gives me confidence. But I think, how do you use that identity?
All of us have multiple identities.
Sure.
The idea that we have one identity and that is it, that is no longer valid. I have half a dozen identities. I'm a Dogra, for example. Nobody may have heard of that in Auroville. It's an ethnic group in North India, and I'm proud to be a Dogra. I am a Rajput. When you are born into a Hindu family, you're bound to be born into some caste or the other. I'm proud to be a Rajput. I am a Hindu. I'm proud to be a Hindu. I live in a Muslim majority state. I'm proud to be in a state where we have Muslim majority. I'm an Indian. I'm proud to be an Indian. I'm a global citizen. I'm proud to be a global citizen. So all of these identities, if you look upon them as concentric circles, then if you have an inner spiritual center, then around that center you can build as many concentric circles as you like, you can flourish. But once you don't have a center, then you become conflictual and eccentric.
So Dr. Singh took the words out of my mouth. A great book to look at that notion of multiple identities is Anitya Sen's book on identity and violence, and he talks very similar to that. But I want to take a little bit one step further, and I'm talking about the education system, is that the notion of being white it can work positively, but it can also be negative. In fact, there's a global campaign that's going on right now. What if I am wrong? In terms of the address in the rise of violent extremism, and be a part of that campaign. So I think one of the things that in schooling that we need to train kids is how do you handle cognitive dissonance, which will come through these multiple identities, and not to be frightened by it, and not to fall into this situation where you just get thrown off that safety zone that Dr. Singh is talking about. So you get into dissonance when you have multiple identities and you're torn when there's a conflict between those identities. And so how do you address that? We don't have that in our schooling systems. And that's one everything that every day we're struggling with. And I just want to elaborate a little bit on the way the brain works. Now, there's been seminal work, and a chap won a Nobel Prize a number of years ago, Daniel Kahneman in economics. One of the few times that they gave a Nobel Prize in economics for somebody who's really done some useful work. Amartya Sen was one, and then Daniel Kahneman came up. And then the one most recently was a chap on behavioral economics. But you see, Kahneman broke the way we make decisions into system 1, system 2 thinking. And what we do really well is train kids, and all of us, in system 2 thinking, which is the neocortex, which is really the one that does the reasoning. But a lot of times, it's system 1 thinking that we work, because that's the emotional. That's the fight versus flight. And that comes from the limbic. And what we think is that limbic only can be trained through experience. That's not true. You can actually train the limbic. And that's what a lot of, and I think Auroville does that as well, through mindfulness and stuff, without doubt. But that's what we are trying to push, is that you actually start training the limbic system, such that when it behaves, it's actually thinking like a system too, but with a knee jerk. And that's tough, but it's worth doing. You know, it's just like a muscle building. You have to build the muscles in their brains as well.
Having been someone who has grown up in Auroville and gone through that education system, in what way has it helped you on this topic of learning to live together?
Well, the question I often ask, of course, is, you know, where are you from? And then it starts like, well, Dutch parents, born in France, moved to India, back to the Netherlands, back to India. So I think, yeah, it has. A few things that I take the opportunity also to answer the other question about the models that perhaps Auroville can give. One thing is that none of us are teachers. I think mentor is a better word. There is focus on beauty rather than academics. And as Jürgen just mentioned now, we do have a whole scale of different types of classrooms which have evolved over the years. But what is common to each is that there is a program which when I speak to the people my age who grew up in Auroville and who have gone through the Auroville educational system, the thing that speaks to us the most and which actually anchored us and made us strongly believe in the free progress system is something that is very close to my heart, and which I've also been trying to bring out to the rest of India, which is called awareness through the body. So while I was in Surat 2 years ago, we tried to give or plant a little seed of what awareness through the body is by just asking about 300 18-year-olds to just focus on their heartbeat, for example, or focus on your breath and bring your attention to different parts of you. And through games and through helping each other and learning that you actually need each other in order to accomplish certain tasks. There's a game we play which is called the river game, where you have to help each other to go from one side of the room to the other, and you realize you can't do it alone. And by focusing on each other's differences, of course, that's not the answer. So we focus on how we are, what is this the same? How are we the same? So, besides guiding and focusing on beauty, I would say that bringing consciousness into the classrooms and beyond the classrooms is one of the models or the tools that Auroville can help to spread.
I have to conclude. Thank you so much for coming here and being with us. And let love, truth and beauty be our watchwords when we leave. Thank you.